Okay, so this is the second installment in the Rosh Hashanah series, part 2, Yom Kippur. And in order to understand the Yom Kippur construct, we have to kind of plug it into the context of the Rosh Hashanah perspective, which really we spoke about a little bit about how each Chag is called a MicroKodesh, which means like a call to a particular purpose, because each one of the pieces of the annualized Chagim that we have all these times that we're not supposed to do malacha, and by not doing malacha, it creates this MicroKodesh dynamic where now you can be focused on a particular aspect of your setup, the way this thing kind of works, the character that you're using, that you're playing, like its various shortcomings or warpings or intersections, dynamics, whatever word you want to use. So each of the Chagim kind of has a different purpose in terms of deeply delving into a particular aspect of the way this is formatted. So if we look at Rosh Hashanah as kind of being, as we said in the previous video, about trying to realize where it is that I'm out of sync with myself, with other people, and with Hashem. So what we kind of set up a way of thinking about what exactly does it mean to be out of sync. So this is the model that we were using, which is that you can think of yourself as trying to figure out who are you versus who are your, like, what, which parts of the thing that you are you, and which parts are kind of part of the tools that you use, where you can call it the character that you're using. And the reason why I'm setting up that model is because what happens is really who you are, according to the Torah's perspective, is you're a self that is unchanging and is always been and always will be and is endless, and that's the self that's looking out through your eyes. It's the you. It's really you. You're the one who's hearing the thoughts and thinking the thoughts and driving the feelings and seeing the things. You're the one who's perceiving, what we call the I, the sense of self, the identity. And when you kind of tap into that in a very fresh way, you can experience that and really kind of almost like make your center be that unchanging self, and then you're able to kind of use all of the aspects of your character, of the tools that you have, as expressions of that self. So that's what it really should be. It should be that you have your center, your point of identity should really be coming from, or be aligned with that self, like you. In other words, that intangible part of you, the part of you which is looking out through the eyes, which is just the part that is not measurable. It's not tangible in any way. So that's really where your identity should be, and then all the different aspects of your character, that includes your thoughts, your perceptions, your emotions, types of things that you do, like the history of your life, like that information, that's all things that can be measured in some way or recorded in some way. So those are all the parts that kind of operate on the character level, or on the tangible part of you, the part that you're expressing through or using to express yourself. So to think about that as an example, so I'm an endless self looking out through my eyes. When I do this, so now this action and this hand, which is comparable and measurable hand, it is an expression. It is expressing the intangible self that I actually am. So this also explains, like, when we say I'm looking for myself, so it doesn't mean that, like, what does it mean I'm looking for myself? Who's the one looking for who? So it's the concept here is that I, which is basically like what can happen to us, and really this is the larger point that we're going to go into now. What can happen to us is that we can get very attached to different aspects of our character, where we move our point of identity from the actual me, the self, and we move it out to a particular part of the tools or character that I'm playing, that I'm using, the tools I'm using. So as an example, if you are very funny, so you go out into the world and you make other people laugh all the time, and then when other people laugh, that says to you, hey, look, like, this is a way for you to get, for you to make an impact in the world. People will recognize you, people will relate to you, and it attracts you towards it, because since other people really focus on that aspect of you a lot, it sort of influences or trains you, conditions you to also start focusing on that aspect of your character, of your set of tools that you use. And then you start to move your point of identity more towards that, as that being actually you. It's even more common with looks. Someone who's very pretty or very attractive, male or female. So what can happen is the world constantly notices you as being pretty. And then what happens is you start to learn from that and kind of reflect that back and say, oh, well, since the world notices me for that, so I will also now notice me for that. And that becomes very easily can become your identity. And when that happens, so you're moving your sense of self and self-awareness away from a true understanding of yourself as being endless, intangible, not really your body, immortal, beyond all these measurable things. And you're now moving it towards a more finite perspective of yourself and saying, oh, I am my body, which then creates a lot of anxiety because you basically start to think that you are finite and that you will die, and you start to wonder, where do I go when I die, and all these types of questions. And that creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of other mental and physical problems. So that's what we mean when we say getting out of sync with yourself. When you slowly move your point of identity away from the endless, intangible, real you towards some aspect or multiple aspects of the tools that you have, so that then you'll start to feel out of sync and you'll start to feel off, that something's wrong. And that's what drives people then to basically say, I need to find myself. What does it mean I need to find myself? It means that I'm out of sync, I'm out of touch with my real self. I got too involved or embedded or immersed in some aspect of my character, and now I feel like I got far away from me, and I have to move away from the character identification and back towards the intangible self identification. And so that's really all the Rosh Hashanah avoda. Avoda is basically to become aware of the fact that you are too embedded in certain habits either within yourself. It's also true how you relate to other people, because if you habituate the way you see somebody else, you don't really try to get to know them in a real way. You're fixating on some aspect of their character. You're basically using a certain mode of interaction that doesn't really go deep enough to actually get to their real self. Instead, you just kind of lean on the character interchanges that you've been using out of habit, and then you never really get deep. So it's, parents do that with kids a lot. We mentioned that in the previous video. So if anyone wants to see more about those examples, you can check out the previous video, Rosh Hashanah Explained. The point that we want to sort of take this to now is Yom Kippur. So what exactly is this next phase? After you figure out in Rosh Hashanah that you're out of sync, and if you're in a relationship with somebody, you can do this every day. You figure out that you're out of sync with somebody. So what happens next? So the first thing you try to do is you try to struggle to bring yourselves onto a similar page. You basically have an interchange, a discussion in which you try to become more aware and to see the ways that you're really off from each other. That's really a Seres Tshuva. That's why Rosh Hashanah kind of feeds naturally into Seres Tshuva. It's the time that you're supposed to really be trying to rediscover yourself or the other person that you're in a relationship with, or Hashem, to learn about Hashem, to learn about somebody else in a real way, and try to get more into a real seeing of who they are. And once you do all of that, once you kind of go through that process, then the last thing that happens, and this is also true in a fight, when you have a fight with somebody, so when you fight, it's because you're out of sync, and then the fight itself is actual struggle. The fight is triggered by being out of sync. The struggle in the fight of back and forth and trying to get through the fight is a Seres Tshuva, and then Yom Kippur is the end of the fight, which is when, now that we got through that, we can almost let it all go. We can release the feelings of tension and of distance, and just feel like it's okay. Okay, I don't need to feel bad anymore. That I hurt this person, or that I was not in sync with them, or that I made a mistake in the relationship. I don't need to feel bad anymore. It's over now. We got past it. And when you hold a grudge, then it's not over. But the idea here is that holding a grudge basically is that you're still out of sync. Something which you feel they still don't really get you in some way. You're like, no, so I can't let this go. This is still a problem. But the idea here is to really let it go. Is that in a fight which is resolved properly, then it's over, and then you can let it go, and you can just say, okay, there's nothing to think about now anymore. And that's what's called, if we want to use that analogy for Hashem, that's what's called Tshuva Gemura. Tshuva Gemura basically means that now you're in a place where you have really tried to get back together with the other person, and then you can let these things go. And so just take it a little further for a second. When you think about moving your sense of self away from the character and back towards who you really are, so what that does is it basically recreates your character. In other words, when you're no longer attached to a particular mode or aspect of your character, so then you can that means you can basically move away and let go of that and sort of say, okay, well, I'm an endless self. I happen to have the characteristic of being funny, but I can decide when to use it and how to use it now that I see that I am not it. If you think you are that characteristic and that's your identity, then it's very hard to change that, because you really need that for your self-esteem, for your sense of self. So the concept here is that Yom Kippur is really that now you've tried to move yourself back to having a sense of self and who you really are, and that really distances you from the character aspects that were unbalanced because you were so hyper-identifying yourself as them. Take that a little further for a second. That's what we mean when we say that all of your what the Gemara says, that all of your chataim, your avonot, they can become zichuyot, usually translated as all of your mistakes can actually become good things. You can recycle the things that you do that are damaging and turn them into good things. And the way that works is that when you are able to separate yourself from particular habits, so then now the process of doing that kind of gives you greater clarity. And I made mistakes because of these habits. Now that I see that, I kind of have experience in which I've seen how I made those mistakes. Now I can actually use that experience to make sure that I don't do that again, and I can kind of become more advanced through the mistakes. That's what we can call learning from our mistakes. So the idea of learning from your mistakes basically means that you realize that you are not those things. You are able to, if you make a mistake and you hyper-identify yourself as the skill that you now made a mistake in, so then you will suffer tremendously on the inside. You'll say, wow, I'm something wrong with me, and this is a huge problem. And that will be like a stain on your sense of self, because it's I made a mistake. I'm an analyst, and I lost $1 million to the company, and I made a mistake, and that's now a stain because that's my identity. I'm an analyst, and I made a mistake, so now I am damaged by that. When you realize you're not an analyst, but you're just that an analyst is part of what it is that your character is doing, but you're actually beyond that. So no one can really touch you. A mistake like that doesn't touch you. It's not like that now my identity is damaged by that. I can never get damaged on my actual self. It's just that in my role right now, I made a mistake that causes problems. I need to figure out how to solve the problem. What can I learn from it to make sure I never do it again? Like how to evolve and develop myself. But that's not me. So the ability to realize what's you and what's not you, so that's what allows you to take every mistake that you make. It's so easy instead to get caught up in a mistake. You get yelled at by your boss, let's say, and then there's ego issues, and you feel like you're getting stepped on, but you also know you did something wrong, and there's a lot of negative vibes and feelings. All of that really is it's because when the boss yells at you, you let that actually touch your sense of self, and you feel bad on the level of your self-esteem. Now, what you should do is you should feel that this was problematic. I damaged somebody else. I should not have done that. I didn't realize, obviously, and I need to figure out what I'm going to do to make amends now, and what's supposed to happen next. And it might even mean sometimes resigning from a job if you do enough damage like that. But the idea is that there's still a barrier between the character's issue and you. And having that clarity that you are not the mistake reduces and can even eliminate the getting so immersed in it that you actually behave in silly ways, like yelling back, getting really upset, getting really depressed, all kinds of things that come with that lack of clarity. So the idea here is that that's what we mean when we say that your chataim and your avonot turn into zchuyot when you do tshuva properly. Because tshuva literally means returning to yourself. It means to kind of get rid of the shells that block you from access to you. And all the shells are your habits of how you relate to yourself. It's also tshuva with somebody else by returning to them and getting closer to them again, and tshuva to Hashem. But it basically just means learning to find the things in you that are real and buried, and try to recreate relationships with people that you love from a place of genuine authenticity, being real. So when you think about that, so when you do tshuva like that, so now you're moving yourself away from the character, and now you're almost like you're cleansing yourself. But it's not really cleansing. It's kind of the wrong word. We tend to use it as tahara, like it says. We have the pasuk that we actually say, "Lifnei Hashem titaru," that we quote in the davening on Yom Kippur multiple times. But the idea is to say that, by my realizing that I'm not these things, I'm not my mistakes or my problems, so that allows me to actually relate to my mistakes and to my problems in a much healthier way, and to basically keep them distant. And so myself is now separated and sifted out and filtered out from the mistakes. I am not my mistakes, and that's why I'm now clean from them. I still have the mistakes there, and I can use them to become better, but I can use them now because I don't think that I am them. So the problem is when you think you are your mistakes, you tend to try to hide your mistakes because you're ashamed. But when you can learn to separate yourself from them, then you're what's called ma'avir al midotav. You can rise above them and separate from them, and that's when they are able to not really be a part of you in your mind. It reduces all the problems. So, given that, if you think about that a little bit, so that kind of changes what Yom Kippur is really about for us. Yom Kippur is not a day where you should be trying to feel bad for all the things that you did wrong. Rosh Hashanah and Aseret Yemei Tshuva is a time period in which you try to uncover the ways that you are out of sync with yourself. You might want to call that things that are wrong, but it's a very, very shallow way of saying that, because just saying something is wrong in a vacuum, in a vague way, doesn't really mean very much to anyone. Even though sometimes we throw it out there in cultural terms, and that's confusing, I think, to just be like, you did something which is so wrong, but I like to ask people, well, what's actually wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with doing the things that you're saying? I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong. I'm just saying you have to tell me a context of some kind of standards and rules and explain to me what exactly is the problem with doing X, Y, or Z things. There is something which is very problematic about hurting somebody else. But why? What's wrong with hurting somebody else? The underlying assumption is that there is someone else there who is endless and special and intangible. And if we're all just these bodies and we're just mammals and animals, so then that's not true anymore. So you have to think about that a little carefully. But the point I'm trying to make is that with the actual process of Yom Kippur, so it's not really about trying to feel like you did something wrong. That's what we kind of did already. We're trying to uncover all the ways that we're out of sync. Yom Kippur is actually a very different type of day. We actually set aside a day. It's MicroKodesh. It's set aside for a particular purpose, which is unique, which is not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah purpose is to try to uncover where we're off. Yom Kippur is a completely different purpose, and it is supposed to be distilled and only be about this purpose. Yom Kippur is about the day. It's about the day in which, the purpose of it is a day in which you are able to only think about the fact that all of your mistakes are okay. In other words, say that a different way. So to look at yourself the way that Hashem sees you. It's the one day you look at yourself the way that Hashem sees you from a place of really, you can call it transcendence if you want, but to look at yourself from a place of, well, Hashem put me here with this set of tools, and this set of tools has things that are very positive, productive aspects, and then this set of tools sometimes goes haywire and gets out of sync, and then or does things that are really too far or unbalanced that are problematic and damaging. But all those things come together in the toolkit. Most of the year, we kind of try to differentiate those things and say, I need to focus on doing the things that are going to be healthy and good. Things that are not so good, I reject them. I try to push them out. I view them as almost separate. But that mentally causes us a lot of problems because the problem is that these things are part of us. Our mistakes are part of who we are. They're part of our package deal that comes with this character. So to negate that for an entire year and basically say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, so it can lead you to actually start thinking that your mistakes are things that you need to always hide and never talk about, and like they just need to be hidden because they're not supposed to happen. But Yom Kippur is what keeps the balance. It tells you that one day of the year you get to think about the fact that no, it's not true. You're not supposed to hide these things like forever or from like maybe you should hide them. Maybe it's important to not tell everyone about everything that you're doing that's damaging all the time. Obviously, maybe not so obvious, but it's important to say that. But one day of the year you get to actually think about the fact that your mistakes are supposed to be part of the deal. In other words, the rest of the year you can think about how I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. But if you only have that way of thinking, you start thinking, you know what, my mistakes are not part of the deal. I shouldn't be doing these things. It's not something which is supposed to happen ever. And the Yom Kippur perspective is actually a counterbalancing perspective which tells you, no, your mistakes are part of the deal. You're going to make mistakes. And you're supposed to think about yourself for one day of the year from the place of I, in the totality, the self with the character, this is a whole unit that is okay. All the mistakes I made are okay. I can let them go now. Like we said in the beginning, the forgiveness phase of the fight, I'm now letting it go. It's over. It's as if nothing happened. I didn't do any of the things that hurt you. It's just nothing now. It's over. And that's really the whole point of Yom Kippur is the one day to think that, to just think that it's okay, which is why if you're spending your day in Yom Kippur thinking about all the things you did wrong and feeling a lot of bad feelings, that is not the point. The point of Yom Kippur is to actually spend the entire day thinking about how I did all these things and I'm okay. That's part of the deal of what it means to be me. Part of to be a tzaddik means to be a person who sees the reality that you fall and you get up, and you fall and you get up. And those two things, the dark and the light together, is the whole picture of who and what you are. So it's kind of like if you worked for somebody and your boss, this guy you worked for, he says to you, like, you know, okay, I just hired you. Here's a list of all the mistakes that you probably will or could end up making. I've made all these mistakes. You might do the same. So I want you to know that if you make the mistake, you should come speak to me about it right away so we can just figure out, I can teach you the ways that I learned to avoid or to build out and get and improve after such a mistake happens. So obviously, like, that's a situation in which, like, you realize I'm not supposed to make a mistake. He doesn't want me to make the mistake. But after you do make the mistake and then you go to him and you talk it out with him and figure out what to do, like, that's okay. It's okay. Like, that's how we work. We're imperfect beings. We're supposed to be here and be imperfect and not get things right all the time. That is wired into the system. Okay, it's like it's not like it's a unfortunate secret like that. We don't all have it together. We all look like we have it together. We try to have an upbeat exterior. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. No one's fine. Everyone is having problems and making mistakes and screwing up their lives in different ways. Everyone, each person is doing that. And that's just what it is. Like that's how we are wired to be that way. This is the whole system is designed to be a place of imperfection, so we can become more and more and more developed, perfect, evolving. That you're never going to get to that. It's a constant dynamic process that we're really in here. So Yom Kippur is a day that counterbalances the tendency to try to marginalize and partition the problems that we have. And it says to us, no, this is the day you invite all those things in and say, this is all one thing. I am the Zev Bannon experience with all of the problems, all the shortcomings, and all the greatness and all the good things. And these are the things that come together. And there is not two separate things. It's all just me. And I accept all of that. And so the acceptance of that, so that's really why we say Al Chet so many times in Yom Kippur davening. You're not sitting there trying to say Al Chet to feel bad, like, oh, I feel so bad, Al Chet this, I'm going to try to feel bad now about this thing that I'm saying that I might not even understand. The Al Chet section, it's only on Yom Kippur. Why don't we say that the rest of the time? Like that whole section is designed for us to be able to say out loud to ourselves and to Hashem, here's all the things that like I'm not proud of, and I can say them out loud now, and it's fine. I just put them out there. Because realize, like when you tell somebody else, or even telling yourself, I do XYZ thing that I shouldn't do. You don't do that. You like to pretend that you don't do it. That we all do. We try to pretend like we did not do the things that we're not proud of. But to say to yourself the words, I do this, even to yourself, is difficult. To say to somebody else is like very difficult. And that's really what we're talking about doing here. We're talking about articulating out loud the things that we are not proud of again and again and again and again, to the point where by the end you're like, okay, it's okay. I'm going to say it again. It feels good, by the way. You know, when you actually say things that you are not proud of to somebody, let's say you have someone that you're close to that you can tell these things. So you say it to them. It's very therapeutic because you start to feel like the parts of me that I constantly have to hide, I can now bring them and invite them in and hug them and love them. And then I can even think about, now that I kind of stop trying to fight them and hide them, I can think about how to use them better. Like these are things that I'm ashamed of, so I try to pretend like they don't exist. Now that I'm inviting them in and saying they do exist, I can think about what to do with them. It's like a very powerful perspective. So that's why we're saying the Al Chet all these times. We're basically trying to say again, yes, I do these things. Like, you know, you go outside and scream to the sky, I do this thing, I do this thing, I do this thing. And you do that again and again, and the quiet line that's being said after each one of those, I do this thing, and that is okay. In other words, this is the one day that you can think to yourself, I don't need to hide what I am. I am all these shortcomings and all these good things and all these bad things. You don't have to hide it. And so that's just for one day, and then you put it away and say, okay, like now I'm going to keep trying to get ahead and use the experience of my deeper awareness of all these shortcomings to now become greater. And that's how you take your avonot and turn them into zechuyot, because you take all the things that you've been doing that are not healthy, you have a greater clarity now on how to use them in a meaningful, profound way, and that's really the outcome of Yom Kippur. So I would encourage anyone who's watching this, when you're thinking about the Al Chet that you're saying, to think about it this way, that the goal of the Al Chet, that's why you come into Yom Kippur trying to wear white, and it's not just the end of the day that's the important part, it's the whole day, all the Al Chets. Because you come in wearing white from the very beginning of Yom Kippur, because you're trying to come in and say, okay, like it is a day of I'm already letting go now, and I'm trying to just be comfortable now. It might take you an entire day to get comfortable with just saying out all the things that you do, and that's why there is a certain type of progression with Ne'ilah being at the end and whatever. But you can do it from the first moment. You can spend the entire Yom Kippur doing it again and again and again and again, and trying to put those things out there in that way. So that is the MicroKodesh of Yom Kippur. That's the purpose of that time period, is to learn to accept yourself in your totality for one day, to be able to do that. And then you can learn to do that even a little bit when it's not Yom Kippur, and constantly oscillate between, I have to try not to make mistakes, but also when I do make them, I accept them, I build on top of them, and I use them as tools to make myself greater. So I just want to wish everyone a Gemar Chasima Tova, and I hope this is a relatively clarifying and useful way of thinking. Chag Sameach.